Their dates were two brunettes with deep tans and whole-eye cosmetic contacts that hid their pupils in favor of featureless expanses of white, so they looked like their eyes had rolled back into their heads, or maybe like they were wearing cue balls for glass eyes. Like most of the Fatkins girls Perry had met, they dressed to the nines, ate like pigs, drank like fishes, and talked about nothing but biotech. So I am thinking, sure, mitochondrial lengthening sounds like it should work, but if that's so, why have we been screwing around with it for 30 years without accomplishing anything? His date. Moira worked at a law office, and she came up to his chest, and it was hard to tell with those eyes, but it seemed like she was totally oblivious to his complete indifference to mitochondria. He nodded and tried not to look bored. South Beach wasn't what it had once been, or maybe Perry had changed. He used to love to come here to people watch, but the weirdos of South Beach seemed too precious when compared with the denizens of his own little settlement out on the Hollywood freeway. "Let us go for a walk on the beach," Lester said, digging out his wallet and rubbing his card over the pay patch on the table. "Good idea," Perry said. Anything to get off this patio and away from the insufferable club music thundering out of the speakers pole mounted directly over their table. The beach was gorgeous, so there was that. The sunset behind them stained the ocean bloody and the sand was fine and clean. Around their feet, Dade County beachcombers wormed endlessly through the sand, filtering out all the gunk, cig butts, condoms, needles, wrappers, loose change, wedding rings, and forgotten sunglasses. Perry nudged one with his toe and it roombed away, following its instinct to avoid human contact. "How do you figure they keep the vags from busting those open for whatever they've got in their bellies?" Perry said, looking over his date's head at Lester, who was holding hands with his girl, carrying her shoes in his free hand. Oh, those things are built like tanks. Have to be to keep the sand out. You need about 4 hours with an air hammer to bust one open. You tried it." Lester laughed. "Who, me?" Now it was Perry's date's turn to be bored. She wandered away toward the boardwalk, with its strip of novelty sellers. Perry followed, because he had a professional interest in the kind of wares they carried. Most of them originated on one of his printers, after all. Plus, it was the gentlemanly thing to do. "What have we here?" he said as he pulled up alongside her. She was trying on a bracelet of odd, bony beads. "Ectopic fetuses," she said. "You know, like the Christian fundies use for stem cell research. You quicken an unfertilized egg in vitro and you get a little ball of fur and bone and skin and stem cells. It can never be a human, so it has no soul, so it's not murder to harvest them." The vendor, a Turkish teenager with a luxurious mustache, nodded. "Every bead made from naturally occurring fetus bones." He handed one to Perry. It was dry and fragile in his hand. The bones were warm and porous, and in tortured elephant man shapes that he recoiled from atavistically. "Good price," the Turkish kid said. He had practically no accent at all, and was wearing a Japanese baseball team uniform and spray-on foot coverings. Thoroughly Americanized. "Look here," he said, and gestured at a little corner of his table. It was covered in roses made from fabric small and crude, with pin backs. Perry picked one up. It had a certain naive charm. The fabric was some kind of very delicate leather, it's skin. His date said, "Fetal skin." He dropped it. His fingers tingled with the echo of the feeling of the leather. "Jesus, I hate biotech." The rose fluttered past the table to the sandy boardwalk, and the Turkish kid picked it up and blew it clean. "Sorry," Perry said, sticking his hands in his pockets. His date bought a bracelet and a matching choker made of tiny bones and teeth, and the Turkish kid, leering, helped her fasten the necklace. When they returned to Lester and his date, Perry knew the evening was at a close. The girls played a couple rounds of eye hockey, unreadable behind their lenses, and Perry shrugged apologetically at Lester. "Well then." Lester said, "It sure has been a nice night." Lester got smooched when they saw the girls off in a pedicab. In the buzz and hum of its flywheel, Perry got a damp and an enthusiastic handshake. "Win some, lose some," Lester said as the girls rolled away in a flash of muscular calves from the pair of beach-perfect cabbies pedaling the thing. "You re not angry?" Perry said. "Nah," Lester said. "I get laid too much as it is. Saps me of my precious bodily fluids. Gotta keep some kai inside. You know." Perry raised up his funny eyebrow and made it dance. "Oh, okay," Lester said. "You got me." I am meeting mine later, after she drops her friend off. I'll get a cab home then, shall I, take my car? Lester said. I'll get a ride back in the morning. No way you'll get a taxi to take you to our neighborhood at this hour. Perry's car had been up on blocks for a month, awaiting his attention to its failing brakes and mushy steering. So it was nice to get behind the wheel of Lester's Big Daddy Roth trike and give it a little gas out on the interstate, the smell of the swamp and biodiesel from the big rig streaming past the windscreen. The road was dark and treacherous with potholes, but Perry got into the rhythm of it and found he didn't want to go home. Quite, so he kept driving, into the night. He told himself that he was scouting dead malls for future expansion, but he had kids who video documented the status of all the likely candidates in the hood, and he kept tabs on his choicest morsels via daily sat photos that he subscribed to in his morning feed. What the hell was he doing with his life? The Walmart ride was a lark. It had been Lester's idea, but Lester had lost interest and Perry had done most of the work. They weren't quite squatting the Walmart. Perry paid rent to a state commission that collected in escrow for the absentee landlord. It was a fine life, but the days blurred one into the next. Directionless. Building the ride had been fun, setting up the market had been fun, but running them well, he might as well be running a laundromat for all the mental acuity his current job required. You miss it, he said to himself over the whistle of the wind and the hiss of the fat contact patches on the rear tires. You want to be back in the shit, inventing stuff, making it all happen. For the 100th time, he thought about calling Suzanne Church. He missed her, too, and not just because she made him famous and now he was no longer famous. She put it all in perspective for him, and egged him on to greater things. She'd been their audience, and they all performed for her, back in the golden days. It was, what, 5 a.m. in Russia? Or was it 2 in the afternoon? He had her number on his speed dial, but he never rang it. He didn't know what he'd tell her. He could call Jan, or even Kettlebelly, just ring them out of the blue, veterans together shooting the shit. Maybe they could have a Codicil reunion, and get together to sing the company song, wearing the company t-shirt. He pulled the car off at a truck stop and bought an ice cream novelty from a vending machine with a robotic claw that scooped the ice cream, mushed it into the cone, then gave it a haircut so that it looked like Astro Boy's head, then extended the cone on a robotic claw. It made him smile. Someone had invented this thing. It could have been him. He knew where you could download vision system libraries, and force feedback libraries. He knew where you could get plans for the robotics, and off-the-shelf motors and sensors. Christ, these days he had a good idea where you could get the ice cream wholesale, and which crooked vending machine interests he'd have to grease to get his stuff into truck stops. He was 34 years old, he was single and childless, and he was eating an ice cream in a deserted truck stop at 2 in the morning by the side of a freeway in South Florida. He bossed a low-budget tourist attraction and he ran a pirate flea market. What the hell was he doing with his life? Getting mugged, that's what. They came out of the woods near the picnic tables, 4 bangbangers, but young ones, in their early teens. 2 had guns, nothing fancy. Just AK-47s run off a computer-controlled mill somewhere in an industrial park. You saw them all over the place, easy as pie to make, but the ammo was a lot harder to come by. So maybe they were unloaded. Speaking of unloaded, he was about to piss his pants. Wallet. One of them said. He had a bad mustache that reminded him of the Turkish kid on the beach. Probably the same hormones that gave kids mustaches gave them bad ideas like selling fetus jewelry or sticking up people by the ice cream machines at late-night truck stops. Keys, he said. Phone, he added. Perry slowly set down the ice cream cone on the lid of the trash can beside him. He'd only eaten 1 spike off Astro Boy's head. His vision telescoped down so that he was looking at that kid, at his mustache, at the gun in his hands. He was reaching for his wallet. Slowly. He'd need to hitch a ride back to town. Canceling the credit cards would be tough, since he'd stored all the identity theft passwords and numbers in his phone, which they were about to take off him. And he'd have to cancel the phone, for that matter. Do you have an older brother named Jason? His mouth said, while his hands were still being mugged. What works a stall by the Walmart ride, selling contact lenses. The kid's eyes narrowed. You don't know me, man. You don't want to know me. Better for your health if you don't know me. His hands were passing over his phone, his wallet. His keys, Lester's keys. Lester would be glad to have an excuse to build a new car. Only I own the Walmart ride, and I've known Jason a long time. I gave him his first job, fixing the printers. You look like him. The kid's three buddies were beginning their slow fade into the background. The kid was visibly on the horns of a dilemma. The gun wavered. Perry's knees turned to water. You re that guy? The kid said. He peered closer. Shit, you are, keep it all. Perry said. His mouth wasn't so smart. Knowing who mugged you wasn't good for your health. Shit, the kid said. The gun wavered. Wavered. Come on. One of his buddies said. Come on, man, I'll be there in a minute. The kid said, his voice flat. Perry knew he was a dead man. I am really sorry. The kid said, once his friends were out of range. Me too, said Perry. You won't tell my brother. Perry froze. Time dilated. He realized that his fists were clenched so tight that his knuckles hurt. He realized that he had a zit on the back of his neck that was rubbing against his collar. He realized that the kid had a paperback book stuck in the waistband of his Bangbanger shorts, which was unusual. It was a fantasy novel. A Conan novel. Wow, time snapped back. I won't tell your brother. He said. Then he surprised himself. But you've got to give me back the credit cards and leave the car at the market in the morning. The kid nodded. Then he seemed to realize he was holding a gun on Perry. He lowered it. Yeah, that's fair. He said. Can't he use the fucking cards these days anyway? Yeah. Perry said. Well, there's some cash there anyway. He realized he had $500 in a roll in a hidden pocket in his shorts. You get home okay? I'll thumb a ride. Perry said. I can call you a taxi. The kid said. It's not safe to hang around here, that's really nice of you. Perry said. Thanks. The kid took out a little phone and prodded it for a minute. On the way. He said. The guns aren't loaded. Oh, well. Perry said. Good to know. An awkward silence spread between them. Look. I am really sorry. The kid said. We don't really do this. It's our first night. My brother would really kill me, I won't tell him. Perry said. His heart was beating again. Not thundering or keeping ominously still. But you know. This isn't smart. You going to stick someone up who has bullets and he's gonna shoot you, we'll get ammo. The kid said. And shoot him. That's only a little better. You know, what do you want me to say? The kid said, looking young and petulant. I apologized, come by tomorrow with the car and let us talk, all right. Lester didn't even notice that his car was missing until the kid drove up with it, and when he asked about it. Perry just raised his funny eyebrow at him. That funny eyebrow, it had the power to cloud men's minds. What's your name? Perry asked the kid, giving him the spare stool by the ticket window. It was after lunchtime, when the punishing heat slowed everyone to a sticky crawl, and the crowd was thin, 1 or 2 customers every half hour. Glenn. The kid said. In full daylight, he looked older. Perry had noticed that the shantytowners never stopped dressing like teenagers, wearing the fashions of their youths forever, so that a walk through the market was like a tour through the teen fashions of the last 30 years. Glenn, you did me a real solid last night. Glenn squirmed on his stool. I am sorry about that, me too. Perry said. But not as sorry as I might have been. You said it was your first night. Is that true? Carjacking, sure. The kid said. But you get into other shit, don't you? Mugging. Selling a little dope. Something like that. Everyone does that. Glenn said. He looked sullen. Maybe. Perry said. And then a lot of them end up doing a stretch in a work camp. Sometimes they get bit by water moccasins and don't come out. Sometimes, one of the other prisoners hits them over the head with a shovel. Sometimes you just lose 3 to 5 years of your life to digging ditches. Glenn said nothing. I am not trying to tell you how to run your life. Perry said. But you seem like a decent kid, so I figure there's more in store for you than getting killed or locked up. I know that's pretty normal around here, but you don't have to go that way. Your brother didn't. What the fuck do you know about it? Anyway. The kid was up now, body language saying he wanted to get far away. Fast. I could ask around the market. Perry said, as though the kid hadn't spoken. Someone here has got to be looking for someone to help out. You could open your own stall. The kid said. It's all just selling junk to idiots. What kind of job is that for a man? Selling people stuff they can't be bothered to make for themselves is a time-honored way of making a living. There used to be professional portrait photographers who'd take a pic of your family for money. They were even considered artists. Besides, you don't have to sell stuff you download. You can invent stuff and print that. Get over it. Those days are over. No one cares about inventions anymore. It nailed Perry between the eyes, like a slaughterhouse bolt. Yeah, he said. He didn't want to talk to this kid any more than this kid wanted to talk to him. Well, if I can talk you out of it, it's your own business. He started to rearrange his ticket desk. The kid saw his opportunity for freedom and bolted. He was probably headed for his brother's stall and then the long walk to wherever he planned on spending his day. Everything was a long walk from here, or you could wait for the buses that ran on the hour during business hours. Perry checked out the car, cleaned out the empties and the roaches and twists from the back seat, then parked it. A couple more people came by to ride his ride, and he took their money. Lester had just finished his largest ever flattened soda can mechanical computer. It snaked back and forth across the whole of the old Walmart solarium, sheets of pressboard with precision-cut gears mounted on aviation bearings. Francis had helped him with those. All day, he'd been listening to the racket of it grinding through its mighty 0.001 kHz calculations, dumping carloads of M&Ms into its output hopper. You programmed it with regulation baseballs, footballs, soccer balls, and wiffle balls. Dump them in the input hopper and they would be sorted into the correct chutes to trigger the operations. With a whopping 1 kilobit of memory, the thing could best any of the early vacuum tube computers without a single electrical component, and Lester was ready to finally declare victory over the cursed UNIVAC. Perry let himself be coaxed into the workroom, deputizing Francis to man the ticket desk, and watched admiringly as Lester put the machine through its paces. "You've done it," Perry said. "Well, I gotta blog it," Lester said. "Run some benchmarks, really test it out against the old monsters. I am thinking of using it to brute force the old Nazi Enigma code. That LL show those dirty Nazi bastards. We LL win the war yet." Perry found himself giggling. "You re the best, man," he said to Lester. "It's good that there's at least one sane person around here. Don't flatter yourself." "Perry, I was talking about you." Lester, oh, Lester said. He scooped a double handful of brown M&Ms up from the output hopper and munched them. "It's not a good sign when you start accusing me of being the grown-up in our partnership. Have some M&Ms and tell me about it." Perry did, unburdening himself to his old pal, his roommate of 10 years, the guy he'd gone to war with and started businesses with and collaborated with. "You restless, Perry," Lester said. He put 9 golf balls, a ping-pong ball, and another 9 golf balls in the machine's input hopper. 2 1/3 seconds later, 81 M&Ms dropped into the output hopper. "You just bored. You a maker, and you running things instead of making things. No one cares about made things anymore." That's sort of true," Lester said. "I'll allow you that. But it's only sort of true. What you missing is how much people care about organizations still. That was the really important thing about the new work, the way we could all come together to execute, without a lot of top-down management. The Bangbanger arms dealers, the bio-terrorists and Fatkin suppliers, they all run on social institutions that we perfected back then. You've got something like that here with your market, a fluid social institution that you cool didn't have had 10 or 15 years ago, if you say so." Perry said. The M&Ms were giving him heartburn. Cheap chocolate didn't really agree with his stomach. "I do. And so the answer is staring you right in the face, go invent some social institutions. You've got one creeping up here in the ride. There are little blogospheres of fans who coordinate what they going to bring down and where they going to put it. Build on that, no one's going to haul ass across the country to ride this ride." Get real, course not." Lester beamed at him. "I've got one word for you, man. Franchise. Franchise, build dupes of this thing. Print out anything that's one of a kind, run them as franchises. 1T work. Perry said. Like you said. This thing works because of the hardcore of volunteer curators who add their own stuff to it. It's always different. Those franchises would all be static, or would diverge. It'd just be boring compared to this. Why should they diverge? Why should they be static? You could network them. Dude. What happens in one, happens in all. The curators wouldn't just be updating one exhibit, but all of them. Thousands of them. Millions of them. A gigantic physical wiki. Oh, it'd be so very 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 cool. Perry. A cool social institution. Why don't you do it? I am gonna. But I need someone to run the project. Someone who's good at getting people all pointed in the same direction. You, pal. You re my hero on this stuff. You re such a flatterer, you love it. Baby. Lester said, and fluttered his long eyelashes. Like the lady said to the stamp collector, philately will get you everywhere, oi, Perry said. You re-fired, you can fire me. I am a volunteer. Lester dropped 6 golf balls and a heavy medicine ball down the hopper. The machine ground and chattered. Then started dropping 100 loads of M&Ms. 100. 200, 300. 400. 500. 600. 700 then some change. What operation was that? Perry said. He'd never seen Lester pull out the medicine ball. Figure it out. Lester said. Perry thought for a moment. 6 squared. 6 cubed. Log 6. 6 factorial. My god, you re-weird. Lest genius is never appreciated. He scooped up a double handful of brown M&Ms. In your face. Von Neumann. Let us see your precious ENIAC top this. A month later. Perry was clearing security at Miami International, looking awkward in long trousers, closed-sole shoes, and a denim jacket. It was autumn in Boston, and he cool DNT show up in flip-flops and a pair of cutoffs. The security guards gave his leathery, lopsided face a hard look. He grinned like a pirate and made his funny eyebrow twitch, a stunt that earned him half an hour behind the screen and a date with Dr. Jellyfinger. What, exactly, do you think I've got hidden up there? He asked as he gripped the railing and tried not to let the illegitimately carborundum. It's procedure. Sir, well, the doc said my prostate was the size of a guava about a month ago. In your professional opinion, has it shrunk or grown? I mean, while you re-up there. The TSA man didn't like that at all. A minute later. Perry was buckling up and leaving the little room with an exaggerated bow-legged gait. He tipped an imaginary hat at the guard's retreating back and said, "Call me," in a stagey voice. It was the last bit of fun he had for the next 4 hours, crammed in the tin can full of recycled discount air traveler flatulence and the clatter of fingers on keyboards and the gabble of 100 phone conversations as the salaryman on the flight stole a few minutes of cramped productivity from the dead travel time. Touching down in Boston and getting his luggage, he felt like he'd landed on an alien planet. The feeling of disorientation and foreignness was new to Perry. He was used to being supremely comfortable, in control, confident. But he was nervous now, maybe even scared, a little. He dialed Jan. "I've got my bags," he said. "I'll be right around." Jan said. "Really looking forward to seeing you." There were more cops than passengers in the arrivals area at Logan, and they watched Jan warily as he pulled up and swung open a door of his little sports car. "What the fuck is this, a Porsche?" Perry said as he folded himself awkwardly into the front seat, stepping in through the sunroof, pulling his bag down into his lap after him. "It's a Lada. I had it imported all over Russia. Evolutionary algorithm used to produce a minimum materials, maximum strength chassis." "It's nice to see you." "Perry, it's nice to see you." "Jan," he said. The car was so low to the ground that it felt like he was riding luge. Jan hammered mercilessly on the gearbox, rocketing them to Cambridge at such speed that Perry barely had time to admire the foliage, except at stoplights. They were around the campus now. Taking a screeching right off Mass Avenue onto a tree-lined street of homely 2-story brick houses. Jan pulled up in front of one and popped the sunroof. The cold air that rushed in was as crisp as an apple, unlike any breath of air to be had in Florida, where there was always a mushiness, a feeling of air that had been filtered through the moist lungs of Florida's teeming fauna. Perry climbed out of the little Russian sports car and twisted his back and raised his arms over his head until his spine gave and popped and crackled. Jan followed, and then he shut down the car with a remote that made it go through an impressive and stylish series of clicks, clunks and chirps before settling down over its wheels, dropping the chassis to a muffler scraping centimeter off the ground. "Come on," he said. "I'll show you your room." Jan's porch sagged, with a couple kids' bikes triple-locked to it and an all-covering chalk mosaic over every inch of it. The wood creaked and gave beneath their feet. The door sprang open and revealed a pretty little girl. 9 or 10 years old, in blue jeans and a hoodie sweater that went nearly to her ankles, the long sleeves bunched up like beach balls on her forearms. The hood hung down to her butt. It was East Coast Bangbanger, as reinterpreted through the malls. "Daddy," she said, and put her arms around Jan's waist, squeezing hard. He pried her loose and then hoisted her by the armpits up to eye height. "What have you done to your brother? Nothing he didn't deserve," she said, with a smile that showed dimples and made her little nose wrinkle. Jan looked over at Perry. "This is my daughter, Lyanichka, who is about to be locked in the coal cellar until she learns to stop torturing her younger brother. Lyanichka, this is Perry Gibbons, upon whom you have already made an irreparably bad first impression." He shook her gently Perrywards. "Hello, Perry," she said, giggling, holding out one hand. She had a faint accent, which made her sound like a tiny, skinny Bond villainess. He shook gravely. "Nice to meet you," he said. "You got your kids," Perry said, once she was gone. "For the school year. Me and the ex, we had a heart-to-heart about the Russian education system and ended up here. I get the kids from September to June, but not Christmases or Easter holidays. She gets them the rest of the time, and takes them to a family dacha in Ukraine, where she assures me there are hardly any mafia kids to influence my darling daughter. You must be loving this," Perry said. Jan's face went serious. "This is the best thing that's ever happened to me. I am really happy for you, buddy." They had burgers in the backyard, cooking on an electric grill that was caked with the smoking grease of a summer's worth of outdoor meals. The plastic tablecloth was weighed down with painted rocks and the corners blew up in the freshening autumn winds. Lyanichka's little brother appeared when the burgers began to spit and smoke on the grill, a 7-year-old in metallic mesh trousers and shirt wrought with the logo of a cartoon Cossack holding a laser sword aloft. "Sasha, meet Perry." Sasha looked away, then went off to swing on a tire swing hanging from the big tree. "You've got good kids," Perry said, handing Jan a beer from the cooler under the picnic table. "Yup," Jan said. He flipped the burgers and then looked at both of them. Lyanichka was pushing her brother on the swing, a little too hard. Jan smiled and looked back down at his burgers. Jan cut the burgers in half and dressed them to his kids' exacting standards. They picked at them, pushed them onto each other's plates and got some into their mouths. "I've read your briefing on the ride," Jan said, once his kids had finished and eaten half a package of chutney Oreos for dessert. "It's pretty weird stuff." Perry nodded and cracked another beer. The cool air was weirding him out, awakening some atavistic instinct to seek a cave. "Yup, weird as hell. But they love it. Not just the geeks. Either. Though they eat it up, you should see it. Obsessive DOESNT begin to cover it. But the civilians come by the hundreds. Too. You should hear them when they come out. GZUS. I'd forgotten about those dishwasher stackers, they were wicked. Where can I get one of those these days, you figure? The nostalgia's thick enough to cut with a knife." Jan nodded. "I've been going over your books, but I can't figure out if you profitable. Sorry, that's me. I am pretty good at keeping track of numbers, but getting them massaged into a coherent picture, yeah." "I know." Jan got a faraway look. "How do you make out on Codicil?" Perry. "Finance-wise. Enough to open the ride, buy a car. Didn't lose anything, ah." Jan fiddled with his beer. "Listen. I got rich off of Westinghouse. Not fuck the service here. I am buying this restaurant rich, but rich enough that I never have to work again. I can spend the rest of my life in this yard, flipping burgers, taking care of my kids, and looking at porn. Well, you were the suit. Getting rich is what suits do. I am just a grunt." Jan had the good grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Now here's the thing. I don't have to work. But, Perry, I have no idea what I am going to do if I don't work. The kids are at school all day. Do you have any idea how much daytime TV sucks?" Playing the stock market is completely nuts, it's all gone sideways and upside down. I got an education so I wouldn't have to flip burgers for the rest of my life, what are you saying? Jan, I am saying yes. Jan said, grinning piratically. I am saying that I'll join your little weird-ass hobby business and I'll open another ride here for the massholes. I'll help you run the franchising op, collect fees, make it profitable. Perry felt his face tighten. What? I thought you'd be happy about this. I am. Perry said. But you misunderstanding something. These aren't meant to be profitable businesses. I am done with that. These are art, or community, or something. They museums. Lester calls them Wondercommers, cabinets of wonders. There's no franchising op the way you talking about it. It's ad hoc. It's a protocol we all agree on. Not a business arrangement. Jan grunted. I don't think I understand the difference between a agreed upon protocol and a business arrangement. He held up his hand to fend off Perry's next remark.